2:10 in the morning, local time, somewhere in the mountains of central Iran. A technician is monitoring a radar console inside one of the most heavily fortified military facilities on Earth. Ballistic missiles sit in launch bays beneath hundreds of feet of rock and reinforced concrete, loaded onto automated rapid loading systems designed to raise them through ceiling apertures and fire without ever exposing them to open air. The facility was engineered to survive conventional air attack, built with North Korean assistance, buried so deep that planners in Tehran considered it untouchable. The radar screen is clean. No contacts, no warnings, no indication that anything is approaching from any direction at any altitude. Then the ground shakes, a deep, concussive punch that travels through solid rock and hits the floor like an earthquake. Dust falls from the ceiling, lights flicker. The sound arrives a fraction of a second later. A muffled detonation from somewhere above felt more than heard through hundreds of feet of mountain. Before anyone can process what just happened, another impact, then another. Something is dropping 2,000-pound penetrating bombs directly onto the blast doors above their heads, punching through rock and steel, and nobody saw it coming. Nobody heard it approach. The radar never registered a single return. 2 people did this. 2 people in a cockpit narrower than a sedan. 172 feet of aircraft, 40,000 pounds of precision munitions, airborne for over 30 hours straight. They crossed the Atlantic in darkness. They refueled from tankers without landing. They entered airspace defended by surface-to-air missile networks built to destroy exactly what they were flying. They opened their bomb bay doors for a fraction of a second, released weapons onto targets buried deep underground, closed the doors, and turned for home. On the night of February 28, 2026, the United States launched Operation Epic Fury. U.S. Central Command confirmed over 1,000 targets struck in the first 24 hours. Command and control nodes, integrated air defense systems, ballistic missile installations, military communications infrastructure. Among the platforms employed, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers armed with 2,000-pound bombs striking Iran's hardened ballistic missile facilities. Admiral Brad Cooper, commander of U.S. Central Command, described the B-2 strikes as uncontested surgical operations against multiple missile facilities deep inside Iran. Here's what almost nobody talks about. This aircraft wasn't designed for Iran. It wasn't designed for Iraq or Afghanistan or Kosovo or Libya, all places it has flown combat missions. It was conceived in the early 1980s for one purpose: delivering nuclear weapons into the Soviet Union through the densest integrated air defense network ever built. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The threat the B-2 was created to defeat vanished before most of the fleet was even delivered. The original plan called for 132 aircraft. Congress slashed the buy to 21. At roughly $2 billion per airframe, the B-2 became the costliest military aircraft ever produced and one of the smallest combat fleets in American history. 2 have since been removed from service. 19 remain. Everyone stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base in central Missouri. And here's the irony that defines this aircraft's existence. 37 years after it was conceived for a war that never happened, the B-2 remains the sole manned aircraft in the American arsenal that can penetrate modern air defenses and deliver heavy munitions onto hardened underground targets. When Epic Fury required strikes on Iran's buried missile facilities, there was no substitute. The machine they nearly didn't build enough of turned out to be the one thing nothing else could replace. To understand why, you need to understand what makes it invisible. And invisible is not a figure of speech, it's physics. The entire aircraft is one continuous curved wing. No vertical tail, no angular fuselage, no external weapons, shaped so that incoming radar energy deflects away. Instead of returning to the source, the skin uses radar-absorbing materials so precisely engineered they must be applied by robotic systems during depot maintenance. And so fragile, the aircraft requires climate-controlled hangars just to keep the surface intact between missions. Engines buried deep inside the wing. Exhaust routed over the top surface to defeat infrared detection. Every pound of the weapon's payload rides inside sealed internal bays, exposed for a fraction of a second during release. And the aircraft carries a passive sensor suite that detects hostile radar from hundreds of miles away and maps the gaps in enemy coverage in real time. The B-2 doesn't jam radar. it routes around it, flying through seams in the defense network that the defenders don't know exist. Here's the comparison that matters. An F-35 can penetrate defended airspace, but it carries two 2,000-pound bombs internally. One B-2 carries 16 or two 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators, the largest conventional bombs in the American inventory. Designed to punch through 200 feet of earth and concrete, no other platform can carry them. When the target is buried inside a mountain, the B-2 isn't the best option, it's the only option. Two unnamed officers from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency had studied the Fordo nuclear facility for approximately 15 years. According to General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, they monitored every vent shaft, every exhaust shaft, every electrical system, every piece of equipment going in and coming out. They literally dreamed about this target as they slept. When the time came to put weapons on those mountains, 15 years of preparation met 30 years of aircraft engineering. Now put yourself inside the aircraft. This is the part most coverage skips entirely. The stealth grabs the headlines. The human reality of putting this machine over a target 6,000 miles from home and bringing it back is the story that never gets told. The B-2's unrefueled range is approximately 6,000 nautical miles. Missouri to Iranian airspace exceeds that. Every intercontinental strike mission is physically impossible without refueling multiple times in midair from tankers pre-positioned along the route. Colonel Mel Dale flew the longest B-2 combat mission in history, 44.3 hours over Afghanistan in 2001. Aboard the Spirit of America, he described the experience this way. Instead of thinking long range about the destination, it's about making sure you get to the next aerial refueling on time, miss one, and the mission is over. For Epic Fury, open source flight tracking identified 4 B-2s under call signs, Pro 41 through Pro 44, rendezvousing with KC-46 Pegasus tankers over the eastern Atlantic. These details have not been officially confirmed. You took off from Missouri around 0200. By hour 6, you've crossed the eastern seaboard and you're over open water. The cockpit is tight, 2 crew side by side, surrounded by displays. There's a fold-down cot behind the seats where one crew member can rest while the other flies. Rest is generous. You're in a flight suit on a metal surface in a space the size of a closet, trying to sleep while 4 turbofan engines vibrate through the airframe at 40,000 feet. The aircraft generates its own oxygen by pulling it from the atmosphere, which strips nearly all moisture from the cabin air. Your skin dries and cracks. Your eyes burn from the instrument glow. Pilots wear a harness, life jacket, and survival vest over their flight overalls the entire mission, and there's no changing clothes. Your lower back stopped registering as pain somewhere over the mid-Atlantic and became a dull permanent compression. You quit thinking about because thinking doesn't help. Refueling happens every 6 hours. You pull within 10 feet of a tanker in darkness. Hold formation for 30 minutes while a boom pumps up to 167,000 pounds of fuel into the aircraft. Lieutenant General Mark Wetherington described refueling as the most stressful part of a long-range mission. If it's dark, cloudy, and turbulent, it demands everything you have. Pilots finish the maneuver drenched in sweat, and there is no shower, no change of clothes. There are go pills available, amphetamines authorized by flight surgeons for when the mission pushes past human limits. By hour 12, the Atlantic is behind you. You're approaching the mission area. The cockpit smells like recycled air, sweat, and the faint chemical bite of environmental systems that have been running nonstop since Missouri. Everything changes. The defensive management system lights up. Iranian radar emissions, early warning arrays, acquisition radars, fire control radars painting across the display. Each one represents a surface-to-air missile battery that can kill you if it finds you. Your aircraft was engineered to make sure it doesn't, but engineered to and guaranteed to are different concepts. The crew knows the difference. You're not jamming anything. You're not outrunning anything. You're threading through gaps in coverage that mission planners calculated before you left the ground. Routes plotted against every known radar position, every known frequency, every known capability. If the intelligence is right, you're invisible. If it's wrong, you'll find out the way everyone finds out in air defense environments suddenly. The target area. The aircraft's radar activates in low probability of intercept mode. Synthetic aperture. Mapping confirms target coordinates against preloaded mission data. GPS-aided targeting feeds continuous updates to the munitions guidance units. This is the moment two DTRA officers spent 15 years preparing for: the ventilation shafts, the exhaust systems, the electrical conduits, every vulnerability cataloged, modeled, tested in hundreds of simulations. Bomb bay doors open, the aircraft's stealth profile is exposed for a fraction of a second. 2,000-pound penetrating munitions drop under GPS guidance. Fins steering them toward blast doors built into the ceiling of a mountain. Doors close. The aircraft is already banking west, total exposure measured in fractions of a second. And the crew feels the aircraft lighten as thousands of pounds of ordnance leave the internal bays. Then quiet. The displays confirm release. The weapons are on their way down, and 200 feet below the mountain's surface, in a facility that Tehran considered invulnerable, the ceiling detonates inward. General Kane described the Fordo strike sequence. The first weapon removed a defensive concrete cap covering the main shaft. Weapons 2 through 5 entered the shaft at over 1,000 feet per second and exploded inside the complex. The return leg requires additional tanker rendezvous over the Gulf or the Mediterranean. Then the long Atlantic crossing. Open-source tracking indicated the 4 returning B-2s diverted from Whiteman due to severe weather. Landing at Dyess Air Force Base in Texas. Total mission time, somewhere north of 30 hours. 2 crew members, 1 takeoff, 1 landing, and 6,000 miles of hostile airspace in between. Colonel Josh Wiatala, the Whiteman commander who oversaw the missions, said the crews came home completely exhausted. Each aircraft carried 2 pilots who took turns resting 45 minutes to an hour at a time between refuelings. His biggest moment wasn't the weapons hitting the target, it was knowing the crews were in friendly airspace and safe. What I told them before they left is, I think this will be remembered as one of the most consequential raids of our lifetime. Epic Fury wasn't the first time a B-2 crew made that crossing. During Operation Allied Force over Kosovo in 1999, the B-2's first combat deployment, bombers flew 31-hour round trips from Missouri to Yugoslavia and back. Colonel Mel Diale, who later flew the record-setting Afghanistan mission, described the takeoff for his first combat sortie. Operators and maintenance crews lined the taxiway to salute the aircraft, knowing these bombers would soon be delivering justice. The fleet flew less than 1% of total Allied sorties, but destroyed 33% of all targets struck in the first 8 weeks. That ratio proved something no specification sheet could demonstrate, that one aircraft arriving undetected could produce results wildly disproportionate to the missions flown. In 2017, the Libya operation refined the logistics further. 2 B-2s, 108 JDAMs, 15 aerial refuelings, 34 hours airborne. That mission became the blueprint for intercontinental strike operations. When Epic Fury was planned, the playbook already existed, according to the U.S. military. During the Iran strikes, little to no resistance was observed. No Iranian defensive fire was detected against the B-2S. The aircraft entered, struck, and departed Iranian airspace completely uncontested. 37 years of engineering, validated in a single night. Every capability the B-2 demonstrated over Iran comes with a constraint that supporters and critics both acknowledge. There aren't enough of them, and they're extraordinarily difficult to keep flying. 19 aircraft for global coverage, stealth coatings that require climate-controlled hangars, and robotic repair. Every 9 years, each B-2 is pulled for months of depot maintenance at Northrop Grumman's Palmdale facility, Government Accountability Office. Reporting has documented that low observable materials are a primary driver of maintenance burden and reduced fleet availability. Losing one aircraft isn't a setback, it's a strategic event. There is no production line. There will never be another B-2 built. One was destroyed in a crash on Guam in 2008. A second caught fire on the runway in 2022. Damage so severe the Air Force retired the airframe entirely because repair costs exceeded what the program could justify. 21 became 19. 10% of the fleet erased by 2 incidents. And the long-range missions that define the B-2's value depend entirely on aerial refueling tankers, aircraft that are not stealthy, not fast, and not built to survive contested airspace. The B-2 can disappear. The tankers that feed it cannot. The Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider is in flight testing now. projected for first operational delivery to Ellsworth Air Force Base by 2027. At least 100 aircraft planned, complete sunset of the B-2 fleet expected by 2032. The aircraft that outlived the Soviet Union, that flew when nothing else could, is approaching the end of its operational life. Not because it failed, but because the Air Force finally built something to carry forward what it started. The B-2 Spirit was conceived in the early 1980s to fly nuclear weapons into the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union no longer exists. 21 were built, 19 remain, maintained in climate-controlled hangars by specialists, sustained by tanker aircraft across oceans, operated by two-person crews who fly longer and further into defended airspace than any aviators in modern military history. Nobody knows their names. No press conference after Epic Fury identified the crews who crossed the Atlantic, threaded through Iranian air defenses, and released weapons onto underground targets that no other manned aircraft could reach. The mission happened. The aircraft returned. The crews climbed out of cockpits they'd occupied for more than 30 hours and went back to a base surrounded by Missouri farmland and somewhere in the mountains of central Iran. Inside a facility that was supposed to survive anything, the ceiling had come down. Satellite imagery in the days that followed showed craters where blast doors had been, heavy machinery, and bulldozers scrambling to fill tunnel entrances with earth. A country trying to bury the evidence of what had already been destroyed. The radar never saw it coming. The most consequential aircraft of this century was designed for a war that never happened, built in numbers too small to lose even one, and flown by people the public will never meet. On February 28, 2026, it did what it was built to do. 3 decades late, against an adversary its designers never imagined, over a country that had no idea it was overhead. By the time the world found out, the aircraft were already home.